Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to be making this bohemian style fringe tote bag. So I'm starting with my fabric now, and I'm using canvas fabric. This is half a yard. Yes, half a yard. The length, I think, is about 54 inches, while the width is 18 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead to fold my fabric into two and start to make my marks and to measure out all the measurements I'm going to be using. So I'm just trimming the edges to make sure it's straight, and then the width of my bag, I'm going to be using 22 inches because it's a maxi tote, like it's a really big one. It's meant to be a beach bag to contain a lot of stuff. So I'm marking the width, which is 22 inches, and for the height I'm going to be using a total of 14 inches. That is the main height of the bag. So I'm going to be extending these measurements by 2 inches. That is what I want to. I later changed my measurements at that top, my extension, to 1 inch, because I just wanted a shorter fringe. So for the squares at the corners, I'm using 2 inches by 2 inches, and keep in mind that my fabric is on fold, so that means that I'm actually cutting two pieces, the back and the front. So once I'm done marking out all of that, I'm just going to go ahead and cut out the front and the back panel of my bag. So once I'm done with my cutting, I have my front and my back panel ready to go. We're going to move on to cutting out the straps. So I cut my straps off camera. I used the remaining fabric at the top of the canvas material. Normally I would have doubled the straps, that is two strips of material per strap, but since I'm short of fabric, I just decided to cut one strap each. So moving on, I'm going to use the squares that I cut out from the bottom of my main panels. So I'm going to just I'm going to mark their centers, and then I'm going to install magnetic snap. So your magnetic snap comes in a pair, that is the female and the male part. So you're just going to center it, install the female part on one and then the male part on the other side. Now I know that I'm having 4 squares right now. Once I install my magnetic snaps, I'm going to use the other 2 squares to just cover it up, so we don't have this part of our magnetic snap showing, so everything is just going to be inside and hidden. So I've installed my magnetic snap, and I'm just going to take it to the sewing machine and stitch the 2 parts together. And then I'm also going to take my straps to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew a straight half an inch line on both sides. So what I'm doing here is to sew the magnetic snap, the fabric squares that have the magnetic snap. I'm going to be using the second fabric square to just cover it on the other side, so I'm stitching those two together. And this fabric actually frays a lot. Like, there's a part that doesn't fray and a part that frays. So what I did was that after my stitching, I just applied some super glue. I trimmed the edges, and then I applied some super glue and there's also, I think there's something called a fray check. It's also some sort of glue, I think, so you can substitute that for because what I have is super glue, so that's why I'm just using that. It works pretty well. So I'm done with my snaps. Now I'm going to go ahead to fold the ends of my straps. As you can see, that way I'm going to fold it before I start stitching my half inch on the sides. Okay, so you're going to fold in half an inch, you're going to sew half an inch, just a straight half an inch line on both sides, because I'm going to have a fringe of some sorts on those parts of my strap. So that's why I'm sewing that line, so that the fringe does not go past where I want it to stop. So essentially that line that we are sewing is where our fringe is going to stop for the strap. We are also going to do the same thing to the upper part of our tote bag as well. So once I'm done with my sewing, by the way, you're going to do this to both straps, okay? And then I'm going to go in. I have this needle. I'm just going to start to create my fringe. Now I'm picking out the lines that are horizontal and not the vertical ones, as you can see. So you're just going to pick out those threads until you get to where you want your fringe to stop. So as you can see, this is my progress so far. I'm going to do the rest off camera. So here I am, I'm changing my measurements and I'm marking 1 inch at the top instead of the 2 inches I initially used. Okay, so you can make your fringe as long as you want. You can go for 2 inches, 3 inches. It's just whatever you prefer, really. So once I'm done with my markings, and I'm going to go ahead and mark the centers of the top of my main panels. And the next step is to sew our straps onto the bag. You can see how nice it looks with the fringe. So the measurement for the straps is to place the straps, I'm using 6.5 inches from the edge and 5 inches from the top, 6.5 inches from the side and 5 inches from the top. So once I have that, I'm going to be, my stitch box on the strap is going to be 2 inches. So I'm just going to mark that out, measure that out, and then stitch just a nice box. You have to make sure that your stitch length is tight and it's not too loose, so that your strap doesn't come undone, and make sure that you're sewing very secure to just make sure that your strap is well secured to the bag. So I want to repeat this on all sides of the front and the back panel, like with both ends of the straps. So you have 2 end straps, like one for the front and one for the back. I did the rest off camera, but I hope you understand that. So I'm moving on now to the base. So you want to place your panels right sides together, and first of all run a stitch straight down to connect your panels together. So this is the part of my fabric that doesn't fray as much, right? But I'm still going to run this first stitch just to secure that place properly, and then I'm going to go ahead. After this stitch, I'm still going to sew it together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but this first stitch is just to secure that part and ensures that it doesn't fray. So now I'm going in with the 1/2 inch seam allowance to just join the front and the back panel together. And once I'm done with that stitch, I'm just going to flip it to the right side. We're currently sewing on the wrong side, but once I'm done with that, I'll flip it to the right side, and then I'm going to top stitch just to give it that nice flat look. So now that I'm done with the base, we want to do something called a fringe seam so that we can finish up our edges very neatly, because we're not lining this. I'm going to place the panels wrong sides together. Okay, so this is the right side that I'm currently sewing at the sides. I'm just going in at even smaller than an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to do that on both sides. Remember, they are wrong sides together, which means we are sewing on the right sides. I think you can see the strap. So we are sewing on the right sides currently, and it's with an 1/8 of an inch or even lesser if you can manage that. And then I'm just going to trim off all this fraying ends. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to flip it wrong sides out. So we are flipping to the wrong side now. You can see that, and this is what it looks like. And then we're now going to go in. You can see it's all looking nice and finished. Then we'll go in with our 1/2 inch seam allowance and then just sew to connect those sides together. So we have all the fraying ends inside. You don't have to be scared that your fabric will fray and rip through the stitches, and everything is looking nice and neat on the inside. So once I'm done with that, it's looking pretty nice. I'm going to repeat this step with the corners. So I'm flipping to the right side now, and then I'm going to connect the corners. I'm just trimming off some bulk at the ends there. I'm going to add some of my super glue later onto those areas so it doesn't fray. So we are connecting these corners together now. Remember, this is the right side. We do that first before flipping to the left side. I'm sewing once again with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, or less than that if you can manage. Well, I think an 1/8 is cool, or even a 1/4, but I generally do an 1/8 when I'm doing a French seam. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to go to the other side. You know, we have two corners just as we have two sides. So I'm going to sew with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. So once I'm done, I'm just going to trim off those fraying ends, and then I'll go back to the wrong side of the fabric, and then we just close, sew by 1/2 an inch, and that, you know, closes up all our ends nicely, and we don't have fraying at our edges, and they are not, the raw ends are not outside. Everything is nice and finished. Okay, so we're done with finishing up all our ends now, and then the next step would be to sew at that 1 inch line that we marked at the top. I hope you can see that. So we are just going to sew all around by that 1 inch mark at the top, and when we get to the centers that we marked earlier, on the centers of the front and back panel, we're going to center our snap panels, and then we're just going to stitch over it. So we have our snap at the center of the bag, and you just want to sew pretty much at that top. So this seam line actually acts as where the fringe at the top is going to stop. So once we are done with our sewing, I think we're pretty much done. We just want to turn it right side out, and we want to start to make our fringe at the top, just like we did with the straps earlier. So here it is. You just want to make your fringe at the top, and it's going to stop at that 1 inch stitch line that you have marked. I'm just going to do a little bit on camera and then do the rest, because it's very tedious. Actually, I would say this is the most time consuming part of making this bag. The fringe literally takes so long. I think it might be because of the nature of the material I used, and I'm done with my fringe. Look how beautiful it looks. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, guys. I really hope you love the bag as much as I do. It's the perfect beach bag and it's so lovely. Thank you for watching. See you next time, guys. Bye.